I never imagined that a single word could hurt more than complete silence, but the day my daughter stopped calling me mom, something inside me quietly shattered. It didn't happen during a fight. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no cruel words thrown across the room. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that feels harmless until it changes you forever. I was standing in my kitchen, slowly stirring a pot of soup. It was the same soup I had made for years, the one my daughter, Emily, used to ask for whenever she visited. The house felt unusually quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Emily walked in without knocking, just like she always used to. Her keys jingled softly in her hand, but her eyes never left her phone. I watched her from across the room, waiting for the sound I had heard for nearly 4 decades. "Mom?" It never came. "I made your favorite soup," I said gently, forcing a small smile. "You can take some with you if you want." She nodded without really looking at me. "That's fine," she replied. That was all. No warmth, no smile, no "Thanks, Mom." I told myself not to read too much into it. People miss words sometimes. Life gets busy. Children grow up. I had trained myself for years to be understanding, to stay quiet, to never demand more than I was offered. Still, my hands trembled slightly as I poured the soup into a container and placed it on the table. I sat across from her, watching her eat in silence. The soft clinking of the spoon against the bowl felt louder than it should have. I remembered how she used to sit at the same table when she was little, her feet swinging back and forth as she told me about school. Back then, every sentence began with "Mom." Now, the air between us felt distant, unfamiliar. After a few minutes, her phone buzzed. She stood up immediately, grabbing her bag. "I have to go," she said, her voice flat. "Already? You just got here." She sighed, the kind of sigh that carries impatience. "I have a lot going on." I nodded. I always nodded. As she walked toward the door, I followed her without thinking. "Drive safely. Call me when you get home." She paused for a moment, her hand resting on the doorknob, then turned her head slightly. "I'll text you," she said. Still, she didn't call me Mom. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the empty hallway. My chest felt tight, as if it were holding a question it was afraid to ask. Was it just a word, or was it the beginning of something much deeper? Before the story continues, let me pause here for a moment. Welcome to my channel, where I share real emotional life stories every day. And before we go further, tell me proudly in the comments, which country and which city are you listening from today? The silence returned, heavier than before. I sat back down at the table, staring at the untouched soup that had already begun to cool. That was when I realized this hadn't started today. Today was just the moment I could no longer ignore it. The phone calls had grown shorter over the past months. The visits had become less frequent. Her voice, once warm and open, now sounded careful, distant. I kept telling myself it was normal. Children build their own lives, mothers learn to step back. But stepping back didn't mean disappearing. That evening, as the sky darkened outside my window, I walked into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo album. My fingers stopped on one picture in particular. Emily was 5 years old, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck, her face pressed against mine. Her smile was wide, fearless, full of trust. Back then, she was her whole world. I closed the album slowly, my chest aching with memories. Somewhere along the way, without a single argument or explanation, I had gone from being Mom to being something else. I lay down without turning off the light, staring at the ceiling. A quiet fear settled deep inside me, whispering that this wasn't just a phase. This was the beginning of losing my place in my own daughter's life. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still dark, wrapped in that heavy silence that had started to feel permanent. For a moment, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hoping the weight in my chest would ease. It didn't. I moved through my routine slowly, making coffee, opening the curtains, sitting at the small kitchen table where Emily once did her homework. Everything felt the same, yet nothing felt familiar. My phone lay face down beside my cup. I didn't pick it up. I already knew there would be no message, no "Good morning, Mom," no follow-up to the promise she had made to text me when she got home. Around noon, I finally broke the silence and called her. It rang 4 times before she answered. "Hello?" she said, distracted. "Hi," I replied softly. "It's me." There was a pause. A small one, but long enough for me to notice. "Yes?" she said. Not, "Hi, Mom," just, "Yes." "I just wanted to check if you got home safely last night," I said. "I did," she replied quickly. "Everything's fine." I waited, hoping she would add something, anything. She didn't. "I made too much soup yesterday," I said, forcing a light tone. "I can bring some over later if you want." She exhaled sharply. "You don't have to do that. I'm busy today." Busy. That word had become her shield. "Oh," I said. "All right." Another pause, the kind where you realize you're the only one still trying. "Well," she continued, "I should go. I'm in the middle of something." "Okay," I said. "Take care." "Bye." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly and stared at it as if it had betrayed me. I couldn't remember the last time she had ended a call without saying, "I love you." I spent the rest of the day moving from room to room, touching objects that held memories, an old scarf she had borrowed and never returned, a chipped mug she had painted for me in elementary school, a stack of birthday cards signed simply, "Love, Emily." She used to write, "Love you forever, Mom." Now even her handwriting felt distant. That evening, I sat on the couch with the TV on, though I wasn't watching it. The images flickered by unnoticed. My thoughts kept circling back to one question I was too afraid to ask out loud. When did I become optional? Days passed like this. Calls I didn't make, messages I rewrote and deleted, invitations I never sent because I already knew the answer. Every small rejection added another layer to the quiet grief settling inside me. One afternoon, Emily finally came by again. She stood in the doorway, her posture tense, her arms crossed defensively. She didn't step inside right away. "I don't have much time," she said. "That's okay. Come in." She walked in, but stayed near the door, as if she were ready to leave at any moment. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, her voice careful. "You've been calling a lot." I swallowed. I didn't realize it was a problem. She looked away. I need space." "Space?" I nodded slowly. "Did I do something wrong?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, it's just things change." "Change how?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her words landed harder than she probably intended. "You don't need to be so involved in my life anymore." The room felt suddenly smaller. "I'm your mother," I said quietly. She flinched at that, just slightly. "Yes," she replied, "but I'm not a child." I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to remind her of the nights I stayed awake waiting for her to come home, of the sacrifices I never talked about, of the way she used to need me. Instead, I stayed silent. She glanced at her watch. I should go. She walked out without looking back. That night, I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly into the pillow so no one could hear. My body shook with each breath, a soft, broken sob escaping before I could stop it. Soft sobbing, shaky breathing. I wasn't crying because she was growing up. I was crying because she was pushing me away, and I didn't understand why. As I lay there in the dark, a painful realization settled in. She wasn't just forgetting to call me mom, she was learning how to live without me, and I didn't know how to survive that. The days after that conversation passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. I stopped calling Emily, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of hearing that tired tone again, the one that made me feel like a burden. Instead, I waited. I waited for a message. I waited for a call. I waited for some sign that I still mattered. None came. One afternoon, while sorting through old mail, I found a letter from my doctor reminding me about a follow-up appointment. I had missed the last one. I stared at the paper for a long time before folding it carefully and placing it back on the table. I thought about calling Emily to tell her. I used to share these things with her. She used to worry about me. She used to say, "Don't forget, Mom, I'll remind you." Now I booked the appointment alone. At the clinic, I sat in the waiting room surrounded by strangers. Younger people scrolled through their phones. Older couples whispered to each other. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, feeling strangely invisible. When the nurse called my name, she didn't look up, just a name spoken quickly, without warmth. Inside the examination room, the doctor asked routine questions. How was I sleeping? Was I eating properly? Any dizziness? Any pain? I answered honestly, though my voice shook when I admitted I hadn't been sleeping well. "Do you have family support?" the doctor asked, tapping notes into his computer. "Yes," I said automatically. Then I hesitated. "I have a daughter," I corrected myself. He nodded and moved on. On the way home, I stopped by a small grocery store. As I stood in line, a young mother ahead of me scolded her child impatiently. The little girl looked up and whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." That single word hit me harder than I expected. Mom. I turned away quickly, my eyes burning. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and finally allowed myself to ask the question I had been avoiding. Had I done something wrong as a mother? I replayed every decision, every rule, every sacrifice. I wondered if I had loved her too much, or not enough, if I had been too present, or too invisible. The guilt crept in quietly, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. A few days later, Emily called. My heart jumped at the sound of the ringtone. I answered immediately. "Hello?" I said, my voice hopeful despite myself. "Hi," she replied. Her tone was neutral. "I need a favor." The word favor made my chest tighten. "What is it?" I asked. "She needs you to watch the house next weekend. We're going out of town." "We?" I repeated softly. She didn't explain. "Just make sure nothing happens. Water the plants." "Of course," I said, without hesitation. "Thanks," she replied. "I'll text you the details." She hung up. That was it. No asking how I was feeling, no apology, no "I miss you," just a task. I realized then that I had slowly been moved into a new role in her life. Not her mother, not her comfort, just someone useful. That weekend, I went to her house with a set of keys she had given me years ago. As I walked through the rooms, I felt like a guest in a life I used to belong to. Family photos lined the shelves. She was smiling in all of them, but I was missing from most. In one frame, my face had been cropped out. I stood there, staring at it, my breath shallow. Even in pictures, I was being erased. On the kitchen counter lay a stack of unopened mail addressed to her. I didn't touch it. I had learned my boundaries. Before leaving, I sat on the couch for a moment, absorbing the quiet of a home that felt nothing like mine. When I returned to my own house, the loneliness felt sharper than ever. That night, I cried again. Soft sobbing, trembling breath. But this time, something else was mixed in with the sadness. A quiet anger, a deep exhaustion. I was tired of shrinking myself to fit into whatever space she allowed me. As I lay awake, staring into the darkness, a thought surfaced, slow, unsettling, but impossible to ignore. What would happen if I stopped trying? What if I stopped waiting? The idea scared me. My identity had always been tied to being her mother. Letting go felt like losing myself. But staying like this felt just as painful. For the first time, I wondered whether holding on was hurting me more than letting go ever could. And that thought stayed with me long after the room fell silent. I didn't stop caring about Emily overnight. Letting go doesn't happen all at once. It comes in quiet moments, in small decisions, in the space where hope slowly learns how to rest. But something did change. I stopped waiting. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped rewriting messages I never sent. I stopped arranging my days around the possibility of her calling. For the first time in years, I asked myself a question I had never dared to ask before. Who am I when I am not needed? The answer didn't come easily. One morning, I woke up and realized I had nowhere I needed to be. No errands for her, no favors, no last-minute requests. Just time. Quiet, unfamiliar time. I went for a walk. It felt strange at first, stepping outside without a purpose. The air was cool, the street calm. I walked past houses filled with lives that didn't revolve around me, and for once, that didn't hurt as much as I expected. At a small park nearby, I sat on a bench and watched people pass by. A couple held hands, a man laughed into his phone, an elderly woman fed birds with careful patience. No one knew who I was, and somehow that felt freeing. That afternoon, Emily called again. I didn't answer immediately. When I finally picked up, my voice was steady. "Hello?" I said. "Hi," she replied. "I just wanted to check. Everything okay at the house?" "Yes," I said. "Everything's fine." A pause followed. "I might come by later this week," she said, "if that's okay." "It's okay," I replied. I didn't ask when. I didn't ask why. She hesitated. "You sound different." "Do I?" I asked. "Yes," she said slowly. "Calmer." I didn't explain. After the call ended, I sat quietly, noticing something new inside me. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Days later, Emily did come by. She stood in the living room, looking around as if she were seeing it for the first time. We sat across from each other, the space between us filled with unspoken words. "You've been distant," she finally said. I met her gaze. "So have you." She looked down. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I know, but you did." Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't realize how much. I stayed quiet, letting the moment breathe. "I think I pushed you away because I was afraid of becoming dependent again, afraid of losing myself." I nodded slowly. "And I was afraid of losing you." We sat there, two women facing the same fear from opposite sides. "I should have told you," she whispered. "I should have said it." I waited. "I should have kept calling you Mom," her voice breaking. Something in my chest loosened. "I never needed you to stay small for me," I said gently. "I just needed to know I still mattered." She reached for my hand, hesitantly at first, then tighter. "You do. You always did." That night, after she left, I sat alone again, but the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I realized then that love doesn't mean holding on until it hurts. Sometimes love means stepping back far enough to let both people breathe. I didn't lose my daughter. I found myself. And if you're listening to this, let me say this gently. If your mother is still alive, don't wait for a dramatic moment to realize her value. Don't let silence become the loudest thing between you. Because one day, the word mom might still be there, but the chance to say it may not be.